beat your opponent until they can't breathe anymore. you know? But
Remember what Vince Lombardi said? I've always fancied myself as someone who tries to promote the concept of tolerance.
Sure.
I've always felt that my fellow country people should think more about that and be more tolerant
Sure.
of those they deem different from them. And for the first time, you burst my bubble a little bit because of your dislike for that word. Explain yourself, Dr. Sheffield.
I think because I'm a student of practice, and I've always felt that practice makes permanent. And because I understand what practice does, it creates behaviors in us because we do it over and over and over again. And my concern was for America was that a lot of people out there talking about teaching tolerance, but tolerance doesn't get to differences. It gets to, putting up with. And I said, wait a minute, cultural competency is about not putting up with, it's about appreciating those differences. It's not about accepting things that we know are bad for us, accepting things that happen in a way that causes people to be part of a criminal justice. It's not about that. It's about treating people who are honorably and law-abiding folks in a way that's accepting and acknowledging rather than tolerating. Because in many ways, it creates a pecking order that you are not worthy of being tolerant of us appreciating you. So what we do is we tolerate you. And I'm all about appreciation and acknowledging differences and doing it in a positive way. And tolerant, just to me, sounds negative. So I've tried to shift people thinking. I'm not sure anybody out there's doing this but me, but I know that it's important for folks to practice appreciating differences as opposed to tolerating them.
Well, you sold me. I am no longer tolerant, but I am appreciative and accepting.
Well, I got news for you.
It's
the goodness
more
of you was already there. You were always appreciative. It's just that you were using the word tolerant. And if that helps you become focused on appreciation, great. But believe you me, your heart was always there.
Well, maybe some people are so far back that they need to get through the stage of tolerance first before they arrive to appreciation and acceptance. I don't know.
How about that?
Probably that's probably an hour seminar we can leave for
that's a good way
day.
of expressing it. That's continuing that we must have to move across, get to the point where we're not tolerating, we're doing more appreciating. Absolutely.
I've seen people become resentful when it comes to tolerating because there's this way that they just kind of, as you said, they put up with something.
Right.
And putting up is something like you're doing somebody a favor. And after a while, you get tired of doing somebody a favor because you really don't want to do this. I'm just putting up with this.
Right.
And the more you put up with it, the more resentment grows. And the more resentment grows, it's like a dam. You start to get cracks in it. And then you get somebody saying something or doing something because they really weren't genuinely committed to whatever it was they were committed to. They were just tolerating it. So I can certainly appreciate the difference between those two things. There's one other thing I wanted to hit on. We talked about this earlier, and I'm thinking again, there's probably some sports folks that will or should watch this particular episode. And we were talking about competition. You were talking earlier before we really got started about the sports programs you were working with and how some of the coaches in the sports programs were not showing true sportsmanship.
Right.
And that they were, I don't know, maybe there's a way that we don't think about cultural competency with competition, because competition in many people's minds is what we did with win as much as you can, right? Win as much as you can. It almost means beat your opponent until they can't breathe anymore. But
Remember what Vince Lombardi said?
Right, right. Old school competition, beat them until they can't walk anymore.
Sure, sure.
But I think there's a way that cultural competency and sportsmanship
Absolutely.
can be part of competition. How would you recommend that?
Well, it's absolutely when you see some of the things that have occurred in sports, and I can speak for Western Pennsylvania because of my role there. You recognize there's a lot of cultural insensitivity going on, and it has so much to do with the practice of kids coming from these schools, because schools are a reflection of communities. That's how they're built. And to be quite honest, some schools are a reflection of communities that were built on isolating people from each other. And we have that problem, particularly in the county that I'm from. And so when we have schools that are rural, that are competing against more urban schools, some of these rural schools have little, if any, diversity, particularly when it comes to issues of race and ethnicity. And so those experiences often lead them to not have had any kind of opportunities to interact positively. Sports, on the other hand, because it's so rah win, doesn't always include those sportsmanship practices of which has its roots in cultural competency. That know how to relate to folks when the game is over, know how to participate in a game that makes folks feel honored. It doesn't happen. So there's a great need. When you see, let me give you an example. There was a competition a little over a year ago between two teams. One team, rural, semi-rural, another team, very much urban. It was during Halloween, and it was played at the host school that had little diversity. And the band of this host school at halftime came out in blackface. Now imagine how culturally incompetent you must be, how disconnected you must be to the life of America if your band comes out in blackface performing at halftime of the game. Who allows that?
You did say a year ago, right?
18 months ago when this happened.
Wow.
Who would allow that, right? You would think that we would be further along, but believe me when I tell you, the lack of experience with diversity creates practices when people aren't experiencing it every day in their life. It creates practices that oftentimes disconnect them from the competency. And my gosh, that you talk, and this was one of our WPIAL schools. And so you can imagine the uproar that it created in the local media to see a school of, especially leaders, Steve, leaders allowing that to happen today. Unbelievable. We had another situation where an urban school and a rural school was competing. Both schools had ugly interaction during this soccer game. White kids using the N-word, black kids using the cracker word, all throughout this game. Now, in the name of sportsmanship, why would folks do that? What would make them think that this game was reduced to competition that simply discounted the importance of sportsmanship? So yes, there was a need, and a great need for, and I can go on and on and on. There's many, many, many more. Last week, 2 weeks ago, a rural school was competing with a semi-urban rural school also, but this school had one African-American cheerleader. And when these schools competed, some student in the fans, one of the fans of the host school, started degrading this one African-American cheerleader. Actually, she was probably the only cheerleader there at the time that was a person of color. a student from the opposing team in the stands was calling her out by the N-word while she's cheering. Imagine. So you can see, and in the sports contest, we hold the school accountable for fan behavior. And so, yes, there is a need for these young folks to understand what it means to compete and do it in an honorable way. And cultural competency is about doing it in an honorable, positive way. So yes, so we are embarked on a process of including cultural competency as a skill set for all of our athletes within our athletic league. And that includes using the Do No Harm pledge so that students can get the message, and holding coaches accountable for ensuring that sportsmanship and athletic courtesy and do no harm will be part of their practice. And it's essential. And so hopefully we'll see some things that make a difference. We already are. We already are seeing things that make a difference in how our kids compete because of their recognition of how important this is.